The Florida HOA ban proposal has sent shockwaves through neighborhoods across the state. Lawmakers are finally asking, should homeowners really live in fear of their own HOAs? For decades, HOAs in Florida have had the power to fine you, restrict you, and in some cases, even take your home away, all for things as small as the wrong shade of paint, a pickup truck in the driveway, or a lawn that isn't trimmed to their liking. But now, the tide may finally be turning. The proposal making headlines today could be the first step towards stripping HOAs of those sweeping powers. And at the center of this movement are real families who've lived the nightmare of HOA abuse. Take Ethan and Rachel. They thought they were buying their dream home in sunny Florida. What they didn't know was that behind the palm trees, quiet streets, and friendly waves, a battle was waiting. A battle against an HOA that seemed determined to control every detail of their lives. Their story is one of frustration, defiance, and a fight that grew so big it ended up on lawmakers' desks. Because this isn't just about one couple. It's about thousands of Floridians who've suffered under HOA rules. And it's why the Florida HOA ban proposal is being debated right now. So how did a single neighborhood dispute spiral into a statewide movement? Let's start from the beginning. When Ethan and Rachel pulled into the cul-de-sac, they thought they'd finally found what they had been searching for. The Florida sun bounced off freshly painted houses, kids rode their bikes along smooth sidewalks, and the palm trees swayed as if they were welcoming them personally. "This is it," Rachel whispered, squeezing Ethan's hand from the passenger seat. For months, they had been bouncing between open houses, losing bidding wars, and watching the market grow hotter by the week. Florida's housing market had been brutal, but this neighborhood felt different. The streets were clean, the landscaping was immaculate, and the neighbors waved as they drove by. It felt like a safe haven, the kind of place where they could raise their two kids without worrying about crime, noisy roads, or bad schools. Every detail of the home they were touring seemed perfect. The kitchen had granite counters, the backyard was fenced in, and the master bedroom opened to a balcony that caught the evening breeze. What they didn't fully grasp was that this perfection came at a cost. Like many neighborhoods in Florida, this one was under the control of a homeowners association. At the time, Ethan and Rachel didn't think much of it. In fact, when the realtor cheerfully explained, "Oh, it's a great HOA. They keep the community beautiful and property values high," the couple nodded along. That's what most people do. They figured the HOA was just another fee, like trash pickup or water service. They were too busy picturing barbecues on Sundays, planting a small herb garden, and watching their kids make friends down the street. The HOA, that was just paperwork. The contract they signed was thick. Pages upon pages of bylaws, restrictions, and clauses that seemed endless. Rachel remembered skimming through it late at night, yawning as she reached the section about architectural uniformity and approved exterior modifications. It didn't sound like anything that would affect their daily lives. Who cared what kind of blinds they installed or whether the garage door could be left open? All that mattered was that they finally had a home. Their dream home. For the first few months, life was bliss. Ethan grilled steaks on Sundays, Rachel planted a small herb garden, and the kids made friends down the street. They joined community events organized by the HOA, a spring barbecue, a Halloween trunk or treat, even a neighborhood yard sale. Everything felt warm and welcoming. The neighbors all seemed proud to live there. Everyone kept their lawns green and their driveways spotless. The streets were quiet, the nights peaceful. But then, slowly, the cracks began to show. It started with a letter. A plain white envelope slipped into their mailbox with the HOA's logo printed neatly at the top. Ethan thought it was just another community newsletter. Instead, it was a notice of violation. Apparently, the grass in their front yard was 2 inches taller than the community standard. Ethan frowned. He said, "This has to be a mistake," showing Rachel the letter. "It rained all week. I was going to mow this weekend." Rachel laughed it off at first. Maybe they just want everyone on the same schedule. But 2 weeks later, another letter arrived. This time, it was about their trash bins. The bins had been left at the curb until noon the day after pickup. According to the HOA, bins must be brought in by 9 a.m. sharp. Still, they brushed it off. After all, rules were rules, and maybe this was just the HOA doing its job. Then came the fines. $50 for the grass, $75 for the bins, another one for a visible oil stain in the driveway, and each fine came with a stern warning. Unpaid fines could lead to liens on the property. Rachel started to worry. "What if they're just targeting us?" she whispered one night. "We're the newest family here. Maybe they're watching us closer than everyone else." Ethan shook his head. "No, it's not personal. They're just strict. Once they realize we're keeping up, it'll stop." But it didn't stop. The notices kept coming, like clockwork. Their mailbox became a source of dread. What used to hold birthday cards and Amazon packages now seemed filled only with threats, warnings, and fees. The dream home was slowly morphing into a prison. Rachel stopped tending her herb garden, worried that planting something unapproved might earn them another violation. Ethan grew nervous about leaving his truck in the driveway overnight. What if that was against the rules too? The kids weren't allowed to leave their bikes in the yard for more than a few minutes. It was suffocating. And then one day, Ethan decided to fight back. He started attending HOA meetings, determined to understand who was behind these letters. That's when he met the board, a small group of neighbors who seemed to take pride in policing the community like watchdogs. At the head of the table was the HOA president, a stern man named Mr. Callahan. He wore pressed shirts, carried a thick binder, and spoke as if he owned not only his home, but everyone else's. When Ethan politely asked why the rules were enforced so harshly, Callahan gave a cold smile. Because without rules, this community falls apart. If you don't like it, maybe this isn't the right neighborhood for you. Those words burned into Ethan's mind. Maybe this isn't the right neighborhood for you. He realized in that moment that the HOA wasn't just there to keep lawns trimmed and driveways neat. It was there to control, to dominate, to squeeze every ounce of individuality out of the families who lived under its watch. And that's when the idea of reform or even banning HOAs altogether started to make sense. Because Ethan and Rachel weren't alone. Meeting after meeting, they began to hear other stories. Neighbors fined for American flags, for Christmas lights, for kids' toys left outside. People whispered about liens placed on homes, about foreclosures over unpaid fines, and families driven out of neighborhoods they once loved. The dream home had revealed the nightmare behind it. And that nightmare would soon grow bigger than Ethan and Rachel ever imagined. Because their fight wasn't just about mowing the lawn on time. It was about freedom, dignity, and the right to actually enjoy the home they had worked so hard to buy. The Florida HOA Ban Proposal might still be months away, but seeds of it were being planted right here, in the hearts of ordinary families like theirs.
Ethan sat in the dimly lit living room, surrounded by a stack of envelopes that all bore the same cold header: Homeowners Association Violation Notice. Each one felt like a punch in the gut, a reminder that no matter how hard he tried, the HOA would always find a reason to keep them on edge. Rachel sat beside him, her arms crossed tightly, her eyes tired. "I'm scared, Ethan," she admitted. "What if they actually put a lien on our house? What if we lose it?" That was the moment something inside Ethan snapped. This wasn't just about grass hide or trash bins anymore. This was about principle. He clenched his fists and whispered, "Enough is enough." At the next HOA meeting, Ethan didn't just sit quietly in the back. He stood up. His voice trembled at first, but the more he spoke, the stronger it grew. "Why," he asked the board, "does this community spend more energy policing trash bins than building a neighborhood worth living in? Why are families terrified of their own mailbox? Why are we fined for being human?" The room fell silent. The HOA president, Callahan, adjusted his tie and leaned back in his chair. "Because rules matter," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "If you can't follow them, maybe you should consider living somewhere else." That line again. Maybe you should live somewhere else. Ethan scanned the room. He saw the discomfort in his neighbors' eyes, the way some of them lowered their heads, afraid to speak. But he also noticed something else. Quiet nods, the flicker of agreement, the hint of rebellion just beneath the surface. That was the spark. After the meeting, a middle-aged man approached him outside. His name was Carlos, and he'd been in the neighborhood for nearly 15 years. "You said what I've wanted to say for a decade," Carlos muttered. "They fined me $500 last year because my daughter parked her car on the street overnight. I paid it because I didn't want trouble. But you stood up." One by one, more neighbors began sharing their stories. A single mom fined for having a basketball hoop in her driveway, a veteran ordered to take down his flag, a retired couple threatened with foreclosure over a broken shutter after a hurricane. Rachel stood beside Ethan, listening, her fear slowly giving way to something new: determination. By the time they walked back home that night, Ethan knew this wasn't just their fight anymore. It was everyone's. Days later, Rachel stumbled across an article online. Lawmakers in Tallahassee were starting to talk about reforming HOAs, some even hinting at proposals to ban them altogether. The headline jumped off the screen: "Florida lawmakers consider sweeping HOA reforms amid growing backlash." Rachel read every word, her pulse racing. "Ethan," she called, holding up her phone, "look at this. We're not crazy. People all over Florida are dealing with the same thing." Ethan leaned over her shoulder, scanning the article. Homeowners from across the state were flooding lawmakers with complaints. Stories of unfair fines, power-hungry boards, and families pushed to the brink were finally reaching the public eye. "This is bigger than us," he whispered. Rachel nodded. "And maybe we can help." That night, they sat at the kitchen table brainstorming. They could write letters to their representatives, they could share their story online, maybe even organize their neighbors to push back against the HOA. But Ethan's mind kept circling back to one thought: if lawmakers are listening, maybe this is our chance. The first step was courage. Rachel posted a long message in a local community forum titled, "When Your Dream Home Becomes a Nightmare: Our Story with the HOA." She wrote about the fines, the threats, the constant fear of losing their home. She didn't hold back. Within hours, replies started pouring in. People from across Florida shared their own horror stories. Some posts came from nearby counties, others from across the state. One woman wrote, "We were fined $1,000 for having hurricane shutters up too long after the storm. I can't believe this is legal." Another said, "Our HOA president literally told me I couldn't plant tomatoes in my backyard garden. I thought I was the only one." Ethan and Rachel realized something powerful. They weren't just telling their story, they were tapping into a movement. Soon after, a local news station reached out. They wanted to interview Ethan and Rachel about their experience. At first, Rachel hesitated. She was nervous about being on camera, about the HOA retaliating. But Ethan took her hand and said, "If we stay quiet, nothing changes." The interview aired on a Friday evening, and within 36 hours, the clip had thousands of views online. Commenters cheered them on, demanding change. For the first time, the HOA seemed rattled. Callahan sent out a community-wide email dismissing the couple as troublemakers spreading misinformation. But instead of silencing Ethan and Rachel, the email only fueled more support. Neighbors who had been too afraid to speak suddenly found their voices. One even slipped a handwritten note into their mailbox. "Thank you for standing up. We're with you." As weeks passed, Ethan and Rachel found themselves at the center of a storm they hadn't planned for. Reporters called, advocacy groups reached out, and lawmakers in Florida began citing real homeowner stories just like theirs, as evidence for why drastic action was needed. The phrase started to echo everywhere: Florida HOA Ban Proposal. Ethan couldn't believe it. What began as a fight over grass and trash bins had grown into a statewide movement. Their little dream home, once a place of dread, had become ground zero for something much larger. But the more attention they gained, the more hostile the HOA became. Callahan and his board doubled down on enforcement. New fines appeared in their mailbox almost weekly. Neighbors who supported Ethan and Rachel were suddenly targeted too. It was intimidation, plain and simple. Rachel stayed strong, but Ethan could see the toll it was taking. She lost sleep, her hand shook when opening the mail, and she jumped when she saw a board member driving slowly. One night, Ethan sat on the porch, staring at the glow of the street lamps, and asked himself, "How much longer can we keep fighting?" But then he remembered Carlos, the single mom, the veteran, all the people who had shared their stories. This wasn't just about their family anymore. If they gave up, the movement could falter. And that's when Ethan made a decision. No matter what the HOA threw at them, they would not back down. Because this was no longer about grass, bins, or even one neighborhood. This was about freedom. This was about Florida families standing up against a system designed to control them. And soon, the fight that began in one small cul-de-sac would move to the halls of power in Tallahassee.
The sun was just beginning to rise when Ethan checked his email. His inbox, once filled with nothing more than utility bills and HOA notices, now overflowed with messages from reporters, advocacy groups, and ordinary Floridians. People from Miami, Orlando, Tampa, even rural towns he'd never heard of, were reaching out to say, "Your story is our story." Rachel padded into the kitchen in her slippers, hair tousled from another restless night. She leaned over his shoulder. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Look at all these messages." Ethan scrolled. One email came from a retired Air Force colonel in Jacksonville. "My HOA threatened foreclosure over a cracked driveway. I fought them in court for 2 years and lost everything. Thank you for standing up. Please don't stop." Another was from a single mother in Orlando. "They fined me $75 because my kid left his bike outside overnight. I didn't pay. Now they say they'll sue me. We need this ban to pass. We need voices like yours." Rachel sat down, tears welling in her eyes. "Ethan, they're desperate," she whispered. "It's not just us anymore." A few days later, they were invited to attend a town hall meeting in Tallahassee, where lawmakers were openly debating what was quickly becoming known as the Florida HOA Ban Proposal. The email came from Representative Angela Reyes, a young legislator who had become a rising star in the fight against abusive HOAs. "We've heard about your story. If you're willing, I'd love for you to share it during the public comment session. Real voices are the most powerful force we have right now." Rachel read the email 3 times before looking at Ethan. "Do you think we should go?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "We have to." The town hall was packed. The air buzzed with tension, a mix of anger, hope, and raw frustration. Dozens of homeowners carried signs, "End HOA tyranny," "Ban the boards," "Homes, not handcuffs." Television crews jostled for position near the front, their cameras sweeping across the crowd. Ethan felt his palms sweating as they found seats in the middle row. Rachel squeezed his hand tightly, her knuckles white. Representative Angela Reyes stepped onto the stage, greeted by cheers. She raised her hands for silence. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "We're here because too many Floridians have had their lives upended by HOAs that no longer serve communities. They control them. Today we talk about the Florida HOA Ban Proposal, and we listen to the voices of the people it affects most, you." The crowd erupted into applause. As the microphone passed from person to person, Ethan listened to one heartbreaking testimony after another. A man with a cane described how his HOA fined him for not mowing his lawn while he was in the hospital recovering from surgery. A mother choked up as she recalled the day sheriff's deputies showed up to evict her family after the HOA foreclosed on her house for $800 in unpaid fees. Every story fueled the fire in Ethan's chest. When his turn came, he stood. His voice shook at first, but once again, anger gave him strength. "My name is Ethan Miller," he began. "My wife and I bought our first home 3 years ago. We thought it was our dream. Instead, it's been a nightmare. We've been fined for the smallest things: grass too tall, a trash bin in the wrong place. We've lived in constant fear of losing our house, not because we broke the law, but because a handful of neighbors decided they should rule our lives." He glanced around, catching eyes in the audience. "And I know we're not alone. This isn't just our story, it's Florida's story. And if this HOA ban passes, maybe, just maybe, we can finally live in peace again." The room erupted into cheers. For a moment, Ethan felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Rachel followed, her voice steadier than she expected. "We are not asking for special treatment. We're asking for freedom. The freedom to live in our own homes without constant harassment, without the fear that we'll lose everything over a trash bin or a child's toy. We need lawmakers to act. Please, for the sake of families across Florida, pass this ban." By the time they sat down, Rachel's heart was pounding, but the applause told her they'd done something right. After the town hall, Ethan and Rachel were approached by reporters. Microphones were shoved in their faces, cameras blinking red. "Do you believe the HOA ban will pass?" one asked. Ethan wiped the sweat from his brow. "I believe it has to. The people have spoken. Now it's up to the lawmakers to listen." That night, their faces were on the evening news. Clips of Ethan's speech spread on social media, shared by advocacy groups, homeowners, and even political commentators. The headline read, "Couple Story Fuels Momentum for Florida HOA Ban Proposal." The days that followed were a whirlwind. Invitations poured in to speak at rallies, to appear on podcasts, even to testify before a legislative committee. Rachel, who had once been terrified of drawing attention, found herself standing in front of hundreds at a rally in Orlando, her voice carried through a megaphone. "This is not just about homes," she shouted, the crowd roaring back. "This is about dignity. This is about fairness. This is about freedom. And we will not stop until the HOA ban becomes law." The chants rose like thunder. "Ban the HOAs! Ban the HOAs!" But with their rising profile came new enemies. The HOA board back home grew increasingly hostile. Callahan, the president, confronted Ethan outside his house one morning. "You think you're a hero? You're a fool. These politicians will forget you tomorrow, but we'll still be here, and you'll regret crossing us." Ethan held his ground. "Maybe, but I'd rather fight and lose than live under your thumb forever." Callahan's eyes narrowed. "You'll regret this." Then he walked away. That night, another violation notice appeared in their mailbox. The offense? This time a decorative plant on their porch, not being uniform with the neighborhood's aesthetic. Rachel crumbled the letter in her hands. "They're not even trying to hide it anymore. They're targeting us." Ethan wrapped his arms around her. "Let them. Every letter they send proves our point." Meanwhile, lawmakers in Tallahassee debated fiercely. Some argued that banning HOAs outright was too extreme. Others countered that abuse had gone unchecked for too long. On the floor of the legislature, Representative Reyes held up a stack of letters from homeowners across the state. These are not isolated incidents. These are families being terrorized by organizations that were meant to protect them. If the government does not act, we are complicit in their suffering. That is why I support the Florida HOA Ban Proposal. The chamber buzzed with energy. Back home, Ethan and Rachel watched the debate on TV with their neighbors. Carlos sat on their couch, shaking his head. "I never thought I'd see the day. Politicians actually fighting for us." Rachel glanced around at the small group that had gathered. "It's working," she said softly. "We're being heard." But Ethan knew the fight wasn't over. Laws could take months, even years to pass. HOAs weren't going to roll over quietly. The board back home was proof of that. Still, something had changed. For the first time, Ethan felt like they weren't fighting alone. They were part of something bigger, a movement. And no matter how ugly the battle became, they weren't backing down. That night, Rachel scrolled through social media and stopped at a video someone had posted from the rally. It showed her standing on stage, megaphone in hand, leading chants of "Ban the HOAs." She covered her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. "That's me," she whispered. "I can't believe that's me." Ethan kissed her forehead. "That's us, and we're just getting started."
The morning of the vote felt like a storm that had been building for months. Ethan woke before dawn, staring at the ceiling. He could hear Rachel breathing beside him, still asleep but restless, her body twitching with dreams that mirrored the anxiety they both carried. He slipped out of bed, padded into the kitchen, and stared at the coffee machine until the first gurgle broke the silence. Today was the day. The Florida HOA Ban Proposal was scheduled for its final legislative hearing before the full vote. If it passed here, it would move closer to becoming law. If it failed, all their months of fighting, all their speeches, all their late-night strategy sessions would collapse in an instant. When Rachel joined him, her eyes still heavy with exhaustion, she didn't bother with words. She just leaned into his chest, and he held her tight. For a moment, they let themselves breathe. "Whatever happens," Ethan whispered, "we've already won something. We've been heard." Rachel nodded, but he could see the worry in her eyes. "Yeah, but I want more than to be heard. I want change." By mid-morning, they were on the road with Carlos, driving north to Tallahassee. The car was quiet, the air thick with tension. Out the window, the landscape blurred by, palm trees, fields, the endless Florida sun. Carlos finally broke the silence. "You know, I never thought three regular folks like us could get this far. My father used to say the system was rigged. Maybe it is, but damn if we haven't shaken it up." Ethan managed a small smile. "We've done more than shake it. We've made them listen." Rachel squeezed Ethan's hand. "Now we just need to make them act." The state capitol was swarming with reporters, activists, and lobbyists. Signs filled the air like a sea of voices frozen on cardboard. "Homes, not HOAs. Ban the boards now. Protect homeowners. Pass the proposal." On the other side of the steps stood the opposition, pro-HOA lobbyists in suits, flanked by board members who carried signs of their own. "HOAs keep community strong. Ban equals chaos. Protect property values." Ethan spotted Richard Callahan, the HOA president from their own neighborhood, standing among them. He was dressed in a sharp navy suit, his expression smug as ever. When his eyes met Ethan's, he smirked and mouthed, "You'll lose." Ethan clenched his jaw, but Rachel's hand on his arm kept him steady. Inside, the hearing chamber was packed. Every seat was filled, people lining the walls, cameras set up in every corner. The chair members sat at the front, their expressions unreadable as they shuffled papers and whispered among themselves. Representative Angela Reyes, the champion of the bill, stood tall at her desk, her face determined. She caught Ethan and Rachel's eyes across the room and gave the faintest nod. The chair banged the gavel. "We will now hear testimony regarding the Florida HOA Ban Proposal." The opposition went first. Lobbyists stepped up to the microphone, their voices polished and firm. Eliminating HOAs would destabilize communities, lower property values, and create lawless neighborhoods. HOAs provide necessary structure and accountability. Another followed. "Yes, there are bad actors, but to ban all HOAs is reckless. What we need is reform, not abolition." A few committee members nodded, scribbling notes. Then came Richard Callahan. He adjusted his tie and leaned into the microphone.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Richard Callahan, president of the Bayside Grove HOA. I've heard the complaints, the sob stories, but the truth is simple. Homeowners signed contracts. They know the rules. They agree to live by them. When they don't, there are consequences. That's not tyranny. That's accountability. He paused, letting the words settle. If you pass this proposal, you'll unleash chaos. You'll destroy property values across Florida. You'll strip communities of order and dignity, and you'll regret it. A few in the audience clapped. Many booed. Ethan's blood boiled, but he forced himself to stay silent. His turn would come. When the supporters were called, Representative Reyes gestured to Ethan and Rachel. "The floor is yours." Ethan stood, his legs trembling as he approached the microphone. He looked out at the packed room, lawmakers, reporters, neighbors, strangers. His heart pounded like a drum. "My name is Ethan Miller," he began, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. 3 years ago, my wife and I bought our first home. We thought we were building a life. Instead, we found ourselves living under constant threat. Not from criminals, not from the government, but from our HOA. We didn't sign up for tyranny. We signed up for a home. And we're not alone. Thousands of Floridians are trapped in the same nightmare. He turned, locking eyes with Callahan. To people like Mr. Callahan, we're just stories, complaints. But to us, this is our life. This is our children's safety. This is our future. And we're here to say enough, enough. The chamber erupted in applause. Rachel followed, her voice fierce and clear. "I've been scared for years. Scared that we'd lose our home. Scared that we'd wake up one day and find everything we worked for gone. But today, I'm not scared anymore. Because I see all of you. I see families, veterans, single parents, elderly couples, and I know we deserve better." She looked directly at the lawmakers. "Pass this proposal. Not for us, for Florida." The cheers were deafening. The committee debated for hours. Some lawmakers echoed the opposition's concerns: property values, order, contracts. Others argued passionately that freedom and fairness outweighed all else. Ethan, Rachel, and their supporters sat through it all, their nerves raw. Every time a legislator leaned against the proposal, Rachel's stomach clenched. Every time someone defended it, Ethan's heart soared. Finally, the chair raised the gavel. "The time has come for a vote." The room fell silent. One by one, the names were called. Representative Alvarez, yes. Representative Douglas, no. Representative Kim, yes. Representative Morales, yes. Representative Carter, no. The tally crept forward, each name a punch to the gut. Ethan gripped Rachel's hand so tightly it hurt. Representative Walker, yes. Representative Green, no. The final vote came down to the chair. The entire chamber held its breath. The chair glanced around, eyes lingering on the packed gallery, the signs, the faces. Then, with a firm voice, he spoke, "Yes." The room erupted. Cheers, shouts, tears. People hugged. Strangers clapped each other on the back. The Florida HOA Ban Proposal had passed the committee. Rachel collapsed into Ethan's arms, sobbing with relief. "We did it! Oh my God, we did it!" Ethan kissed her hair, his own eyes wet. "Not just us, all of us." Outside, the crowd roared as the news spread. Reporters swarmed them, cameras flashing. "Do you think the full legislature will pass it?" Ethan took a breath, his voice steady beside the chaos. "They have to. Today was proof that the people won't be silenced. This is just the beginning. Rachel added, "We're not stopping until this ban becomes law. No family should have to go through what we went through. Not in Florida, not anywhere." Behind them, Callahan stormed past, his face red with fury. "This isn't over. You've made enemies you can't even imagine." But Ethan didn't flinch. For the first time, he felt unshakable. They were no longer just victims of an HOA. They were leaders in a movement that had just scored its first victory. And the real battle was only beginning.
The victory in Tallahassee felt like lightning in a bottle. For one night, Ethan, Rachel, and Carlos allowed themselves to celebrate. They joined other supporters at a small restaurant near the Capitol, where the air was electric with chants of homes, not HOAs, and strangers toasting one another like old friends. But even as Rachel laughed for the first time in weeks, Ethan felt a prickle of unease in his chest. He knew the fight wasn't over. In fact, it was only just beginning. The next morning, the storm broke. Every major Florida newspaper carried the headline, "Florida HOA Ban Proposal Clears Committee in Historic Vote." Beneath the triumphant titles were fiery op-eds warning of chaos. Columnists declared the proposal dangerous, radical, and an assault on property rights. Talk radio exploded with callers fuming about freeloaders who don't want rules. Cable news ran split screens, footage of cheering crowds outside the Capitol alongside grim-faced analysts predicting doom for Florida's housing market. By noon, the backlash had taken a darker turn. At their home, Ethan opened the mailbox to find a stack of letters, some congratulatory, others venomous. One, written in bold black marker, read, "People like you are destroying Florida. Hope you lose your house." Another carried no return address, just a single typed sentence, "Shut up or you'll regret it." Rachel's hands trembled as she read them. "They're threatening us, Ethan. This is getting dangerous." Ethan tried to steady her. "That's what they want, to scare us back into silence, but we've come too far to stop now." Still, he double-locked the doors that night. Meanwhile, Richard Callahan was already mobilizing. In a downtown office tower in Miami, he sat across from a team of high-priced lobbyists. His face was tight with anger. "They embarrassed me, on live television. And worse, they moved the bill forward." He slammed a fist on the table. "This ends now." The head lobbyist, a slick man named Daniel Brooks, leaned back in his chair. "Relax, Richard. This isn't our first rodeo. We know how to kill a bill like this." "How?" Callahan demanded. "Money," Brooks said simply. "Campaign donations, ad blitzes, pressure on lawmakers. We paint this as an economic disaster waiting to happen. The words property values scare politicians more than anything." "And the activists?" Callahan asked. Brooks smiled coldly. "We discredit them, dig into their pasts, find skeletons. If we can't find any, we invent them." Callahan's eyes gleamed. "Good. Make their lives hell." 2 days later, Ethan and Rachel's faces were plastered on TV screens across the state, not as heroes, but as villains. "Who's really behind the HOA ban push?" a news anchor asked. The segment showed photos of Ethan and Rachel, grainy and unflattering. The reporter's voice dripped with suspicion. "Sources say Ethan Miller has a history of unpaid debts. Rachel Miller once fought with her HOA over an unapproved renovation. Are these the kind of people we want writing Florida's laws?" Rachel nearly dropped her coffee when she saw it. "They're lying. That renovation fight was a broken fence and we paid every fine years ago." Ethan clenched his fists. "They're spinning it, twisting everything. And the debts, those were medical bills when I was out of work. They make it sound like we're criminals."
Carlos called minutes later. Turn on Channel 7. They're saying I'm a radical agitator. They found some old protest I went to in college. This is a hit job, plain and simple. Ethan's voice hardened. Then we fight back. We tell our story our way. They went on the offensive. Rachel wrote an op-ed for the Miami Herald, pouring her heart onto the page. We are not criminals. We are not radicals. We are homeowners who dreamed of a safe place to raise our kids. HOAs turned that dream into a nightmare. This isn't about property values. It's about freedom, fairness, and dignity. Ethan appeared on local talk shows, calmly countering every smear with the truth. They can attack me all they want, but they can't erase the thousands of Floridians living in fear of their own HOAs. The public battle lines hardened. Supporters rallied behind them, flooding social media with messages of encouragement. But the opposition grew louder too, flooding lawmakers' offices with calls to kill the bill. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Rachel sat at the dining room table, exhausted. I don't know how much more of this I can take. Every time I open my phone, there's another article tearing us apart. Every time I step outside, I wonder if someone's watching. Ethan took her hand. I know, but remember what you said after the hearing? You weren't scared anymore. Neither am I. They want us broken. We can't give them that satisfaction. Rachel studied him for a long moment, then nodded. All right. Then let's keep fighting. But the fight was about to get uglier. A week later, a breaking news alert flashed across Florida. Anonymous group launches Stop the Ban campaign. Slick ads hit the airwaves, portraying the proposal as reckless. Dramatic music played over images of crumbling houses, vandalized lawns, and lawless neighborhoods. A narrator warned, if Florida bans HOAs, who will protect your home? Who will keep your neighborhood safe? Don't let chaos take over. Say no to the ban. The ads ended with Rachel's face frozen mid-blink and the words, "Can we really trust them?" Rachel slammed the remote on the couch. They're using me as a villain. Ethan felt fire rise in his chest. Then we'll show them the truth. We'll outwork them, outtalk them, and outlast them. Carlos, ever the strategist, nodded. We need a counter-campaign, not just defense, offense. Let's hit the road. Town halls, community meetings, show real people what's at stake. And so they did. Over the next month, Ethan, Rachel, and Carlos crisscrossed Florida. They spoke in libraries, church basements, and school gyms. They met retirees who feared losing their pensions to HOA foreclosures. They met young families drowning in fines. They met veterans who said HOAs disrespected their service by banning flags. Each story fueled the fire. Each face reminded them why they fought. At one packed town hall in Orlando, a veteran in uniform stood up and said, voice shaking, "They told me I couldn't fly the flag I fought for. That's when I knew HOAs had gone too far. You have my support. You have all our support." The crowd roared, chanting, "Ban the HOAs! Ban the HOAs!" Ethan caught Rachel's eye, and for the first time in weeks, he saw hope. Real hope. But in the shadows, Callahan and Brooks watched with growing fury. They're gaining momentum, Callahan snarled, slamming a folder shut. Every town hall they hold, we lose ground. Brooks smirked, though his eyes were sharp. Momentum doesn't matter. We don't need the people, we need the politicians, and politicians listen to money. He slid a list across the table. Here are the lawmakers on the fence. We've lined up donors. By the time the vote comes, they'll be in our pocket. Callahan leaned back, satisfied. Then it's settled. They might win the hearts of the people, but we'll own the votes. The battle for Florida's future was no longer just about lawns and fences. It was about power, money, and control. Ethan, Rachel, and their allies had sparked a movement, but their enemies had unleashed an empire, and the final clash was drawing near.
The Florida sun blazed hot over Tallahassee, but Ethan could feel a colder fire brewing in the air. Attention, scrutiny, momentum. It started with a single headline on a national site. Florida lawmakers consider banning HOAs. Could this be the start of a movement? The article spread like wildfire, shared across Facebook groups, Reddit threads, and TikTok videos. People who had never cared about HOA politics suddenly argued about it at work, at dinner tables, and in classrooms. Rachel scrolled through her phone in disbelief. "Ethan, look! A hashtag. Hashtag ban the HOA. It's trending nationwide." Sure enough, videos poured in. A veteran in Texas saying, "If Florida can do it, so can we." A single mom in California filming her HOA letter that fined her $50 for a child's bike left outside. A family in Ohio telling a story about their HOA suing them over siding color. The stories were endless, and the faces looked just like theirs, ordinary Americans tired of being pushed around. "This isn't just about Florida anymore," Rachel whispered. By the end of the week, national news crews descended on Tallahassee. CNN, Fox, MSNBC, vans lined the street, reporters jostling with microphones. Ethan and Rachel, who had once been anonymous homeowners, now faced cameras wherever they went. "Mr. Miller, Mrs. Miller," shouted a reporter, "do you think Florida will be the first state to ban HOAs nationwide?" "Are you worried about the lobbyist backlash?" asked another. Rachel swallowed hard, lights flashing in her eyes. Ethan steadied her hand before answering. "This isn't about me or my wife," he said firmly. "This is about families who just want to live in peace without fear of losing their homes over a fence or a flag. Florida is the start, but this is bigger than one state. This is about freedom." The clip played across the nation that night. In living rooms, diners, and airports, people saw Ethan's calm conviction. To some, he became a hero. To others, a dangerous populist. But one thing was clear: everyone was watching. In Washington, D.C., lawmakers took notice. In a dimly lit office, a senator from Arizona leaned back in his chair as his aide showed him the clip. "HOAs, huh? I've had calls about them before, but never like this." His aide nodded. "The grassroots energy is real. If Florida pulls this off, other states could follow. It could become a campaign issue." The senator stroked his chin thoughtfully. "Maybe it's time to get ahead of this wave." Back in Florida, the attention was both blessing and curse. Rachel sat at their kitchen table exhausted as she sifted through emails. Some were heartwarming. "Thank you for standing up for us. I thought I was alone until I saw you." Others were chilling. "You are ruining America. If you don't shut up, someone will make you." She pushed the laptop shut with shaking hands. "Ethan, I can't read any more of this. It's too much." He rubbed her shoulders. "I know, but for every threat, there are 100 messages of hope. That's what we hold on to." Still, at night, as he lay awake staring at the ceiling, he wondered how long they could survive being symbols in a fight that had grown larger than them. The national spotlight brought unexpected allies too. A popular podcaster invited Ethan and Rachel on his show. Sitting across from him in a neon-lit studio, they shared their story, the fines, the harassment, the moment they decided enough was enough. The episode went viral overnight, with millions listening. Clips filled TikTok, Rachel's trembling but determined voice saying, "We just wanted a home, that's all." Ethan's steady vow, "We will not be bullied into silence." Fans flooded them with donations for legal support, travel expenses, and a grassroots campaign fund. Within weeks, their movement had raised more than some political candidates. Carlos, amazed, joked, "You two are the HOA-busting Kennedys now. People don't just want you to win, they want you to follow you." Ethan chuckled nervously. "I never asked for that." But Rachel, though, stared at the screen showing their donation total, her expression serious. "Maybe it doesn't matter what we asked for. Maybe this is what we were meant to do."
But while supporters lifted them up, their enemies sharpened their knives. Richard Callahan, furious at losing control of the narrative, launched his counterstrike. He funded a new national ad campaign. Dramatic footage showed overgrown lawns, broken fences, and rowdy parties. A narrator thundered, "Without HOAs, your neighborhood will fall apart. Property values will plummet. Is this the future you want? Don't let extremists destroy your community." The ads ended with Ethan's face, labeled "The Man Who Wants to Ruin Florida." The smear campaign spread online too. Fake social media accounts circulated rumors. Ethan was secretly backed by developers. Rachel was a radical with ties to anti-American groups. Friends called in concern. "Are these things true?" Rachel snapped, "Of course not, but they don't care about truth. They care about control." Ethan sighed. "Then we stay ahead of them. We speak first, and we speak loud." The movement hit a fever pitch when a congressional hearing in D.C. announced it would discuss the growing conflict over homeowners associations. Ethan and Rachel were invited to testify. Sitting at the long oak table beneath glaring lights, they faced rows of lawmakers and a packed audience. Cameras rolled. Rachel spoke first, her voice steady by trembling hands. HOAs were supposed to protect communities. Instead, they've become private governments, unaccountable, unelected, and often cruel. We've heard from thousands of families across America who've been fined, harassed, even foreclosed on. This isn't just about lawns, it's about liberty. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the chamber. Then Ethan leaned forward. "We are not anti-rules. We are anti-abuse. Communities can thrive without being ruled by petty tyrants. Florida is leading the way, but this issue belongs to every American who's ever felt powerless in their own home." The clip made headlines the next morning. Florida couple takes HOA fight to Congress. Not everyone cheered. Pundits raged on TV. "This is socialism. They want to destroy property rights." Others countered, "This is about freedom. Why should unelected boards have more power than homeowners?" The debate divided America, splitting across ideological lines but not in the usual ways. Strange alliances formed. Libertarians and progressives found themselves on the same side, while real estate moguls and corporate lobbies lined up against them. For the first time, Ethan saw what their movement really was. Not just a state battle, but a national reckoning. Back in Florida, the streets reflected the division. Supporters rallied with homemade signs. "Homes over HOAs! My yard, my choice!" Opponents marched too, waving banners. "Protect property values! Stop the ban!" One night, as Ethan drove past dueling crowds outside the state capitol, Rachel whispered, "This is bigger than we ever dreamed." Ethan nodded, gripping the wheel, "And bigger than we ever feared." The climax loomed closer. The Florida legislature was set to hold its full vote in just weeks. Lobbyists doubled their efforts. Grassroots organizers worked around the clock. The nation watched, breathless. Would Florida become the first state to strike down HOAs? Or would the power of money and fear crush the movement before it could fully bloom? Ethan and Rachel, caught in the center of history, knew only one thing. The fight wasn't theirs alone anymore. It belonged to millions.
The Florida state capitol stood like a fortress that morning, its white columns gleaming under the hard sun. But the beauty was drowned out by the noise. Crowds swarmed the steps and sidewalks, split into two roaring armies. On one side, supporters held signs painted in bold strokes: "Homes over HOAs. Freedom starts at home. Ban the HOA." Families, veterans, retirees, and young people chanted together, their voices echoing against the marble walls. On the other side, opponents shouted just as fiercely, waving glossy banners paid for by lobbyists. "Protect our neighborhoods. HOAs keep communities strong. Don't let extremists destroy property values." The tension crackled like a live wire. Police lined the staircases, hands resting on batons, ready for anything. Rachel stood at the edge of the crowd, her heart hammering in her chest. She had never seen anything like this. This "This feels like history," she whispered. Ethan adjusted his tie, but his hands betrayed him with a faint tremor. He had spoken at rallies, testified before lawmakers, and even stood under the harsh blare of congressional hearings. But today wasn't about words. Today was about votes. "History or not," Ethan said, his jaw tightening, "we have to walk in there and finish what we started." Inside the Capitol rotunda, the atmosphere was no calmer. Lobbyists in expensive suits huddled in corners, whispering strategies, their eyes cold and calculating. Grassroots activists milled nervously in the galleries, clutching folders of petitions. Journalists jockeyed for prime spots, cameras and microphones at the ready. At the center of it all, the Florida House chamber loomed, its mahogany desks lined up like soldiers waiting for battle. The speaker's gavel pounded. "This session will come to order." Ethan and Rachel sat in the gallery, hands clasped tightly. Carlos sat behind them, his usual smirk replaced by solemn determination. "This is it," Carlos murmured. "They vote today." Rachel exhaled slowly, fighting the nausea that crept up her throat. And then everything changes. The debate began. Representative Linda Torres, a fiery supporter of the ban, rose to speak first. "Colleagues, for too long, HOAs have been a shadow government in our state. They fine families into foreclosure, punish veterans for flying the flag, and drive seniors from homes they've lived in for decades. Today, Florida has a chance to lead. Today we say enough is enough." Cheers erupted from one side of the chamber. Booing rose from the other. Next came Representative Charles Whitman, an opponent backed heavily by Callahan's lobby. "This proposal is reckless. HOAs protect property values. They ensure neighborhoods remain safe, clean, and prosperous. Without them, Florida communities will collapse into chaos. Trash-strewn lawns, crumbling fences, unsupervised pools. This is what awaits us if we destroy HOAs." His words were met with loud applause from the opposing crowd. Ethan clenched his fists. He'd heard the same fear-mongering 100 times, but hearing it echoed across the chamber with Rachel beside him filled him with fire. As debate raged, tension outside boiled over. Supporters and opponents clashed in shouting matches, their chants colliding in deafening waves. At one point, a scuffle broke out on the Capitol steps, a man waving a "Ban the HOA" sign shoved by an HOA supporter in a crisp polo shirt. Police rushed in, pulling them apart before fists could fly. Rachel flinched at the distant commotion. "It's turning ugly," she whispered. Carlos shook his head. It was always going to. When people are this scared of losing power or freedom, they'll fight tooth and nail. Back inside, the battle of speeches reached its climax. Representative Torres rose again, her voice trembling with emotion. "My own father lost his home because of an HOA fine. A Vietnam veteran, foreclosed on because he built a wheelchair ramp that didn't match the aesthetic. Is this who we are? Do we value paint colors more than people? Colleagues, the eyes of the nation are upon us. Let's show them Florida still stands for freedom." The chamber erupted. Supporters in the gallery cheered, some with tears streaming down their faces. Rachel gripped Ethan's hand so tightly her knuckles went white. "This is it," she whispered. "This is the moment." Finally, the speaker called for the vote. "All members will cast their vote on House Bill 421, the Florida Homeowner Liberation Act." The giant electronic board lit up as lawmakers pressed their buttons. Green for yes, red for no. Ethan and Rachel held their breath. First one green, then another green, then a red. The board filled slowly, each light a burst of hope or a stab of fear. Outside, the crowd pressed closer to the Capitol doors, chanting as news of the ongoing vote spread through phones and live streams. Carlos muttered under his breath, "Come on, come on." The final votes tallied. The speaker read aloud, his voice echoing through the chamber. "By a vote of 68 to 52, the measure passes." For a moment, silence. A stunned, electric silence.
Then the chamber exploded. Supporters leapt to their feet, cheering, crying, hugging each other. Reporters rushed from the room, shouting into microphones. Rachel gasped, covering her mouth with her hands as tears spilled down her cheeks. Ethan pulled her into his arms, his own eyes wet. "We did it," he whispered, his voice breaking. "We actually did it." Outside, the news broke like a tidal wave. Supporters screamed in joy, waving their signs high, strangers hugging strangers, cars honked their horns in solidarity. A group of veterans raised an American flag, chanting, "Freedom! Freedom! Freedom!" Opponents shouted in fury, some storming away, others vowing revenge. Callahan's lobbyists, their faces grim, slipped into black SUVs without a word. But the story had already escaped their grasp. Every network flashed the headline within minutes. Florida becomes the first state to ban HOAs. That night, Ethan and Rachel sat together on their porch, watching the sunset bleed orange and pink across the horizon. For the first time in months, their street was quiet. No cameras, no chants, no arguments. Just the chirp of crickets and the soft rustle of the breeze. Rachel leaned her head on Ethan's shoulder. "Do you realize what this means? Families across Florida, they're free now. No more fines for gardens, no more threats over flags, no more living in fear." Ethan exhaled slowly, his chest heavy but lighter than it ever had felt. "It means more than Florida. It means the start of something bigger. Texas, Ohio, California, they'll be watching. They'll follow." Carlos, sitting across from them with a beer in hand, grinned. "You two just started a revolution. Hope you're ready for what comes next." Ethan chuckled softly, one step at a time. Rachel smiled through her tears. "At least tonight we can breathe." For once, they didn't feel like symbols or warriors or leaders. They just felt like homeowners, finally free in their own home.
The chamber erupted in cheers as the final gavel slammed down. It was official. Florida had passed the bill to ban abusive HOA practices, a law that would reshape communities forever. Ethan sat frozen for a moment, his hand gripping Rachel so tightly she could feel the tremor in his fingers. For months they had fought, doubted, and endured the weight of intimidation from HOA officers who thought they owned the very ground under their feet. Now the tables had turned. Reporters swarmed the floor. Cameras flashed. Ethan found himself pushed forward, the unlikely face of a movement that had started with the simple refusal to pay an unfair fine. His voice cracked as he addressed the crowd. "This wasn't just about me. It was about every family who felt powerless. Every parent who wondered if they could plant a tree in their yard without permission. Every veteran, every retiree, every working mom and dad who just wanted freedom in their own home." Today, Florida said enough. Rachel's eyes glistened with tears. She remembered the sleepless nights, the threats of foreclosure, the HOA officer pounding on their door with a clipboard like a weapon. And now, those memories felt like they belonged to another life. The governor signed the bill on live television, pen scratching across parchment that would soon be framed in the Capitol. Behind him, lawmakers applauded, some even wiping away tears. The words were clear: Homeowner Autonomy Act. But outside the chamber was where the real story unfolded. Hundreds of ordinary people had gathered, holding handmade signs. Freedom from HOAs. My home, my choice. Florida leads the way. The roar of the crowd shook the marble steps as Ethan and Rachel walked out, hand in hand. Strangers hugged them. Children chanted their names. A veteran in uniform saluted. For the first time in years, Ethan felt like his home truly belonged to him again. As the sun set over Tallahassee, he turned to Rachel and whispered, "This is just the beginning. Florida lit the fire, and soon the whole country will follow." The camera panned upward, catching the sea of cheering citizens below, the state capitol glowing golden against the twilight sky. The sound of freedom,
unshackled, unstoppable, carried into the night.